The Panzer. Now, these Panzers just we're gonna start from the very beginning. No, not the Panzer II. We're gonna go back to the Panzer I, back where it all started, more or less, of course. Now, the Panzer I, it sure diddly was a tank. It was definitely there. It definitely shot bullets, and it definitely was used. But, paper thin armor, it wasn't built for very long. There were more command tanks. They were more used as training tanks. And so they were only built for about 4 years. Of course, they had the Alf C and the Alf F variants, which were just kind of, it seems, up armored, not even up gunned, just more different versions of the Panzer I. And the Panzerjäger 1 being their first, tank destroyer, with very little armor, but with the 4.7 packed gun, it was just a gun with armor on treads. And that's what they used it for. Really only produced from 1940 to 1941, during the invasion of France. It worked quite well with just a moving pack gun. Next up, the Panzer II, also known as the Kampfwagen II, being designed from 1934 and being produced from 1936 all the way until January of 1945. It had solidified itself as the staple anti-infantry tank, with one 20mm cannon, usually loaded with HE, and one MG34. Its purpose, of course, was never to be tank versus tank warfare. They were always there to back up the infantry and support them as much as they could. And soon enough, the Panzer II chassis got converted to the Sturmpanzer II chassis with a 150mm or a 15cm SIG 33 howitzer. And produced with the Panzer II, the Panzer III. Or I wouldn't say produced, but in combat, the Panzer II, the Panzer I, II, and III often saw combat together throughout the first years, not of the war, but of the Nazi reign throughout most of Europe, like Poland. And of course, the Panzer III, being designed from 1935 to 1937, would see production from 1939 to 1943, caused it to have 13 total variations. And that is not including the Stug or Sturmgeschütz series of mobile artillery. To start off, the A through C series only had 15mm of armor pretty much everywhere, with the A through C also having the 3.7 centimeter or 37 millimeter main gun. And then the D through G variants had 30mm all the way around, and then the F through J variants get the upgunned 5cm or 50mm main gun, which is the shorter version. Then everything past J gets 50mm everywhere. And then from J through M, they get the longer 50mm. With the Panzer L, it had 20mm thick standoff armor, which is basically to protect against any shape charge rounds like the ones from the bazooka. And the last of the Panzer IIIs, the Panzer IIIN, was equipped with the 7.5cm or 75mm KWK-37 L24 gun. Only about 700 of these were produced and re-equipped from about 1942 to 1943. And now on to the Sturmgeschütz, or Stug for short. This was a assault gun mounted on the Panzer III chassis. Never really used on the front lines. It was always armed by artillerymen for artillery use, and pretty much artillery use only until the very end of the war, until they started pumping them out specifically for anti-tank work because they were running out of materials, and the Stug, being a turretless, pretty much just half the tank that you need, worked fairly well as a tank destroyer. And because it was so cheaply produced, they made almost 12,000 total Stugs. Now, they were all equipped with the short 75, some later equipped to the longer 75. Now, the regular Stug 3 was first produced in 1937 as more or less a training vehicle and not quite suited for any kind of combat. But battle was never always that far away. The Stug went everywhere on all fronts and was used quite extensively until the very end of the war, starting with the Stug 3 Oust A, first seeing combat in France and functioning very well. Of course, with the later Oust B, C, D, E, and F, also the F8 and G, they were pretty much just simple fixes and bips and bobs and doodads here. New commanders hatch. Commander gets a full cupola with all of its mirrors and 360-degree view. But up until the Panzer Oust F, not the Panzer Oust F, the Stug 3 Oust F is when it got its long 75mm gun. And now the Panzer IV, pretty much the standard for the German army. Definitely just the solid standard after working their way up since, the start of the war, since 1939. It was produced from 1939 to 1945. It was designed back in 1936. It used its 7.5 centimeter gun, or 75mm. For the Oust A, its first variant, it was using the short 75 until the Oust J, or I guess it moves over to the F2 Oust J, which uses the longer 75. It's just a bigger and better Panzer III, with all of its variants, like the Stug, the Jagdpanzer, the Brummbär, Nashorn, Wirbelwind, Ostwind, which I will be going over, of course. But whole armor's 80mm, the sides are 30. It's got good protection, especially for 1939. This is amazing for 1939. Of course, the Stug 4 is pretty much just the bigger cousin of the Stug 3. It's still under its artilleryman role and hasn't really been put into front-line combat. It's, of course, just hanging back with all of its artillery bros. Of course, the same can't be said for the Jagdpanzer IV, which is just the casemate assuming its anti-tank role, and it does it quite well with very good angles, with enough armor in the front to pretty much be able to ricochet and take rounds all day. And then the Brummbär. The Brummbär is a 150mm gun wielding 100mm of armor in the front. Just massive damage can come out of this thing. Only about 300 total were built, but these behemoths of just blunk out around, just coming raining down high explosive onto other people. And the Wirbelwind Ostwind, just using 20mm for a mobile anti-air, working very well. And lastly but not least, the Nashorn. This 88mm with the long 88 variant, being able to punch holes in every single piece of armor thrown at it. Just this huge round going at such high velocities. Deadly, to say the least. And that's pretty much every Panzer variant wrapped up in a relatively short video. I am very tired. This is very late. Bye.